The meeting. Rin's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light as she crept closer to the human settlement. The young alien girl had never been this close to a human colony before. Her people, the Xylorians, considered humans unpredictable and chaotic, warning their youth to stay away. But Rin wasn't like the others. Her curiosity often got the better of her, and today was no exception. She crouched behind a bush, her thin blue fingers gripping its branches as she watched the humans through a large window. Inside the community center, a group of humans was gathered, laughing loudly. Their sounds of joy were strange yet fascinating to Rin. Xylorians rarely laughed. Emotions were seen as weaknesses, distractions from duty. But Rin couldn't help but wonder what was so funny. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from her hiding spot. The closer she got, the louder the laughter became. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. What if they caught her? What if they were dangerous? She shook off the thought. Curiosity won over fear every time. Inside the community center, Mark was sitting at a round table with his friends. They had been working all day on repairing the colony's solar panels and were now enjoying a much-needed break. In Mark's hands was a whoopee cushion, and he was demonstrating its hilarity to the others. "Watch this," he said, placing the cushion on a chair. When his friend Sarah sat down, the loud farting noise filled the room, sending everyone into fits of laughter. Sarah rolled her eyes but couldn't help laughing along. "That's so childish, Mark," she said, though her smile betrayed her amusement. Rin pressed her face to the glass, her wide silver eyes sparkling with interest. She had never seen such a strange object before, let alone heard such a peculiar sound. Was it a kind of human instrument, a weapon? Her thoughts were racing. Suddenly, Mark noticed the faint outline of Rin's face in the window. He squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Hey, guys, I think we have a visitor." The laughter died down as the group turned toward the window. Rin froze, realizing she'd been spotted. For a moment, she considered running back to the safety of the forest, but something in Mark's expression stopped her. He didn't look angry or threatening, just curious, like her. Mark stood up and slowly walked toward the door. "Don't be scared," he called out, his voice calm and welcoming. "You can come in." Rin hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but her curiosity was stronger. She stepped back as the door opened, revealing Mark standing there with a friendly smile. Up close, he looked even taller and more intimidating than she imagined, but his kind eyes put her at ease. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Rin," she said softly, her voice musical and shy. "Rin," Mark repeated, nodding. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mark." He gestured for her to come inside. The other humans watched in silence, unsure of what to make of the situation. Slowly, Rin stepped over the threshold, her slender frame tense but determined. She glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the whoopee cushion. Mark noticed her interest and picked it up. "Curious about this?" he asked, holding it out to her. Rin nodded. What does it do?" Mark grinned and placed it on the chair again. "Sit here and find out." Cautiously, Rin sat down. The whoopee cushion emitted its signature noise, startling her. Her silver eyes widened in shock before a sound escaped her lips. A laugh. High-pitched and pure, it filled the room, catching the humans off guard. She laughed. Sarah exclaimed, unable to hide her surprise. Rin clapped her hands together, her laughter continuing. "It makes a funny noise," she said, her voice filled with delight. "Is this a human game?" Mark chuckled. "Sort of. It's called a whoopee cushion. We use it for jokes." Rin's head tilted, her curiosity growing. "Jokes? What are those?" The humans exchanged amused glances. Mark explained, "Jokes are things we do or say to make each other laugh. It's a way to have fun." Rin's smile faded slightly as she considered this. "My people don't have jokes," she admitted. "We don't laugh much." Mark frowned. "Why not?" Because emotions are distractions, Rin said, repeating what she had been taught. But this feels good. I like it. Mark's smile returned. Well, you're in the right place. Rin, humans are all about emotions and having fun. As the evening continued, the humans introduced Rin to other quirky human objects: a rubber chicken, a pair of novelty glasses with a fake nose, and bubble wrap. Each new item brought a fresh wave of laughter from her joy lighting up the room. By the time Rin left, the humans had learned as much about her as she had about them. She promised to return the next day, eager to experience more of this strange, wonderful thing called humor. But as she walked back toward her ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that her curiosity might bring trouble, not that she cared. For the first time in her life, Ren felt truly alive. The cultural exchange. The sun dipped below the horizon as Ren returned to the human settlement the next day, her excitement barely contained. The laughter and warmth of the humans had stayed with her throughout the night, and she couldn't help but wonder what more these peculiar creatures had to show her. Her own people valued silence and control, but in the humans, she had glimpsed a world alive with emotions. Inside the community center, Mark and his friends were already waiting. They had prepared a table filled with what they called human curiosities, determined to give Rin a glimpse into their culture. When Rin stepped into the room, her silver eyes widened at the sight of the objects. A rubber chicken, a slinky, a set of fake vampire teeth, and even a box of bubble wrap. "Welcome back, Rin," Mark said warmly, gesturing toward the table. "We thought you might like to learn more about human fun." Rin tilted her head, her antennae twitching with curiosity. "What is all this?" "These," Mark said with a grin, "are some of humanity's greatest treasures. Well, maybe not greatest, but they're definitely fun." The first object Rin picked up was the rubber chicken. She turned it over in her hands, her brow furrowed. "What does this creature do?" "It doesn't do much," Sarah said, suppressing a laugh. "It's just funny." Rin gave the chicken a tentative squeeze. The loud, ridiculous squawk made her jump, and her eyes widened in surprise. Then, slowly, a smile crept across her face, followed by that same high-pitched, musical laughter that had charmed everyone the day before. "It's so strange," she exclaimed, squeezing the chicken again. The squawk echoed through the room, triggering a wave of laughter from the humans. Mark leaned forward, his grin widening. "Want to try something even better?" He handed her a box of bubble wrap. Rin looked at the small, transparent bubbles, poking one with her finger. When it popped, she gasped, her antennae standing on end. "It makes a sound." "Here," Mark said, tearing off a sheet and handing it to her. "You can pop them all." Rin's fingers moved quickly, popping bubble after bubble. Her laughter grew louder with each pop, filling the room with a contagious joy. The humans couldn't help but join in, their laughter blending with hers. As the evening went on, the humans explained more about their culture. They told her about movies, games, and the strange human tradition of pulling pranks on each other. Rin listened intently, her fascination growing with every word. "Why do humans like to make each other laugh?" she asked at one point, her silver eyes sparkling with curiosity. Mark thought for a moment before answering. "Because it brings us closer together. Laughter makes people happy, and it helps us forget about the bad stuff, even if it's just for a little while." Rin's smile faltered as she considered this. "My people don't believe in happiness like that. They say emotions make us weak." "That's a shame," Sarah said softly. "You've got such a great laugh, Rin. It'd be a waste to keep it hidden." Rin looked down at her hands, her thoughts racing. Could her people be wrong? Was there a strength in emotions that they had overlooked? She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wanted to learn more about humans and their strange, wonderful ways. But just as she was about to ask another question, the door to the community center burst open. Everyone turned to see a tall, stern-looking alien standing in the doorway. His skin was a deep shade of blue, and his sharp, glowing eyes scanned the room until they landed on Rin. "Rin," the alien said, his voice cold and commanding. "You have been gone too long. The captain demands your presence." The room fell silent. Rin's antennae drooped, and she took a step back. "I was just." "Enough," the alien said, cutting her off. "You know the rules. Humans are dangerous. They corrupt. Come with me now." Mark stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Wait a minute. Rin's not in any danger here. We're just showing her our culture." The alien turned his piercing gaze on Mark. "You call this chaos a culture? Laughing at meaningless objects, wasting time with nonsense. This is why humans cannot be trusted." Mark opened his mouth to argue, but Rin shook her head. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I'll go." The alien grabbed her arm, leading her toward the door. As she glanced back at the humans, her eyes filled with an emotion she didn't fully understand. She didn't want to leave, but she couldn't defy her people. As the door closed behind her, the humans stood in stunned silence. Mark clenched his fists, his mind racing. He didn't know much about Rin's people, but he knew one thing. She deserved to laugh, to feel joy. And if her people couldn't see that, then maybe it was up to him to show them. The movie experience. Back aboard her ship, Rin sat in her quarters, her gaze fixed on the stars outside the window. The silence of the Xylorian vessel was almost oppressive after the lively human settlement. She could still hear their laughter echoing in her mind, and see the way Mark and his friends had looked at her, not with judgment or indifference, but with warmth. It was a feeling she didn't want to lose. A soft chime broke her thoughts. She turned to see her communication console blinking. When she answered, Mark's face appeared on the screen. His expression was serious, but tinged with a hint of his usual humor. "Hey, Rin," he said, his voice low to avoid drawing attention. "I know things got complicated earlier, but I wanted to check on you. Are you okay?" Rin smiled faintly. "I am. Fine. But I missed the noise. Your world feels so alive." Mark's expression softened. "Then why don't you come back?" She shook her head. "The captain would never allow it. He says your ways are dangerous." Mark leaned closer to the screen, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then maybe we bring our ways to you. I've got an idea. It might not be allowed, but it's worth it." Before Rin could ask what he meant, the screen went dark. She sat back, her antennae twitching with curiosity. What was he planning? The next day, as Rin performed her duties aboard the ship, a notification pinged on her datavat. It was a secure message marked as urgent. She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was watching, then opened it. A single line of text appeared. "Meet me at the airlock. Mark." Her heart raced as she slipped away from her post. When she reached the airlock, she found a small rectangular device sitting on the floor. It was sleek and black, with a glowing screen. Beside it was a note. "Press play." Rin picked up the device, her fingers trembling. She pressed the button, and the screen lit up. A human figure appeared, a man in a black suit with exaggerated features. He slipped on a banana peel and fell flat on his back, prompting a loud comical sound. Rin's eyes widened, and a giggle escaped her lips. The video continued, showing a series of slapstick comedy scenes. Rin couldn't tear her eyes away. The human's exaggerated movements, silly expressions, and chaotic antics were unlike anything she had ever seen. She laughed harder than she had in years, her musical voice filling the airlock. "What is this magic?" she whispered, her antennae quivering with delight. Mark's voice came from behind her, startling her. "It's called a movie. That one's a classic. Charlie Chaplin." Rin spun around, clutching the device. "You're here. How?" Mark grinned. "Let's just say your security isn't as tight as you think. Besides, I had to show you what you were missing." She glanced nervously down the corridor. "If the captain finds you." "He won't," Mark said quickly. "I'll be gone before anyone notices. I just wanted to share this with you." Rin looked back at the device, her expression softening. "Your people, You create these stories just to make others laugh. Mark nodded. It's one of the things we're best at. Laughter brings people together, even when they don't speak the same language. Rin's smile faltered. My people would never understand this. They see emotions as distractions. Maybe they'd just forgotten how to feel, Mark said gently. Maybe you could remind them. She stared at him, his words sinking in. Could she really challenge the beliefs of her people? The idea was daunting, but something in Mark's voice gave her hope. Will you show me more? She asked hesitantly. Mark's grin widened. Thought you'd never ask. For the next hour, Rin and Mark huddled in the airlock, watching more movies on the small device. Rin's laughter grew louder with each scene, her worries momentarily forgotten. For the first time, she felt free. Free to express herself, to experience joy without fear of judgment. But their moment of peace was short-lived. The airlock door hissed open, and the captain stepped inside. His cold eyes locked onto Mark and Rin, his expression unreadable. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Rin froze, clutching the device to her chest. Mark stood protectively in front of her, his posture defiant. She's learning about our culture, he said evenly. It's harmless. The captain's gaze shifted to Rin. Is this true? Rin hesitated, her antennae drooping. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. It is true. I wanted to understand them, to see why they laugh. And now I understand. It's not weakness. It's strength. The captain's eyes narrowed. Strength? What strength is there in foolishness? Mark stepped in. It's not foolishness. Laughter helps us cope, connect, and build trust. It's a language anyone can understand, even without words. The captain stared at them in silence, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned and walked out without a word. Rin looked at Mark, her heart pounding. What does this mean? Mark shrugged, his grin returning. It means he didn't stop us. That's a good sign. As the airlock door closed, Rin felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could bring a little human joy to her people, and maybe they would learn to laugh again. Trouble arrives. The silence in the Xylorian ship's command chamber was heavy as the captain stood at the central console, reviewing security footage. His sharp, glowing eyes narrowed when he saw Rin and Mark huddled in the airlock, their laughter breaking the strict decorum of the ship. The sight of the human, so casual and defiant, filled him with disdain. Commander Fry, the captain barked, summoning his second-in-command. A tall, armored Xylorian entered the chamber and saluted. Find the human. Detain him immediately. Yes, Captain, Fry replied, his voice cold and precise. Rin, unaware of the captain's orders, was in her quarters, her mind racing with everything Mark had shown her. The movies, the jokes, and the human's joy all swirled in her thoughts. She could still hear their laughter in her head, a sound so foreign yet comforting. Could emotions truly be a strength, as Mark had said? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp chime at her door. When it slid open, 2 Xylorian guards stood there, their expressions as unreadable as ever. Rin, one of them said, the captain has summoned you. Immediately. She froze, her antennae twitching nervously. What does he want? That is not for us to say. Follow us. Her heart sank, but she nodded, trying to steady her breathing as she followed the guards through the ship's sterile corridors. The hum of the engine seemed louder than usual, or perhaps it was just the pounding of her own heart. When she entered the command chamber, the captain was standing with his back to her, staring at the footage of her and Mark in the airlock. The screen paused on her face, frozen in a moment of pure laughter. The sight made her stomach twist. She knew what was coming. Rin, the captain said without turning around, his voice low and sharp. Explain this. She hesitated, her throat dry. I was learning about humans, about their culture. Culture. The captain finally turned to face her, his expression hard. You call this chaos culture? wasting time with nonsense, laughing at trivialities. It's not trivial, Rin said, summoning her courage. It's connection. It's understanding. Humans use laughter to bond with each other, to find strength in difficult times. The captain's eyes narrowed. And you believe this? Foolishness. I do, she said firmly, her antennae straightening. It's not weakness. It's something we've lost, something we need. The captain took a step closer, his towering presence casting a shadow over her. Do you realize what you're saying, Rin? You are questioning everything we stand for, everything that makes us Silurian. I'm not questioning it, she replied, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. I'm saying we can be more. We can learn from them. Before the captain could respond, an alert blared through the ship. Unauthorized presence detected in Sector 7. The voice of a Xylorian officer announced. The captain's eyes flashed with anger. The human, he growled. He's still on board. Meanwhile, Mark was moving carefully through the ship's lower levels, his communicator in hand. He knew sneaking onto the Xylorian vessel had been risky, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Rin needed his help. The captain's stern demeanor didn't sit right with him, and he wasn't about to leave her alone to face it. His communicator buzzed. Mark, Sarah's voice came through. You need to get out of there. The Xylorians know you're on board. I can't leave yet, Mark whispered, ducking into a maintenance corridor. I need to make sure Rin's okay. Do you even have a plan? Sarah asked, exasperated. Mark smirked. I'm making it up as I go. His smirk faded, though, when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He pressed himself against the wall, holding his breath as two Xylorian guards passed by, their weapons gleaming under the ship's harsh lights. Once they were gone, he continued down the corridor, his mind racing. Back in the command chamber, the captain turned to Rin. Your human friend has brought this upon himself. He will be captured and dealt with according to our laws. No, Rin said, stepping forward. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's only trying to help. Help? The captain's voice was cold. He's corrupted you with his reckless ways. He has no place on this ship. Before Rin could respond, the doors to the chamber slid open, and two guards entered, dragging a struggling Mark between them. Captain, one of the guards said. We found him in the lower levels. Mark's defiance didn't waver as he was shoved to his knees before the captain. If you want to blame someone, blame me, he said. I'm the one who showed Rin our culture, but don't punish her for being curious. The captain regarded Mark with contempt. You humans are all the same. Reckless, illogical, a danger to order. Maybe, Mark said, a smirk tugging at his lips. But we know how to laugh. Can you say the same? The captain's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then, with a sharp gesture, he ordered the guards to take Mark away. As they dragged him toward the door, Rin stepped forward, her voice ringing out. Wait. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. If you want to punish him, then you'll have to punish me too. I chose to learn from him. I chose to laugh. The captain stared at her, his expression unreadable. You defy me, Rin, for a human? Yes, she said, her voice firm. Because he's right. There's strength in what they've shown me. And I think, deep down, you know it too. The captain's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as if he would lash out. But then he turned away, his shoulders stiff. Take them both to the holding cell, he said coldly. We'll see if laughter is still worth it when the consequences come. Rin and Mark exchanged a glance as the guards led them away. Despite the fear swirling in her chest, Rin felt a small spark of hope. She had stood up for what she believed in, and for Mark. And somehow, she knew this wasn't the end. The contest. The holding cell was dimly lit, its metallic walls cold and unwelcoming. Mark leaned against one wall, arms crossed, while Rin sat on the small bench across from him, her antennae drooping in worry. The silence between them was heavy, but neither spoke for a while, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "So, what's the captain's deal? Is he always this cheery?" Rin glanced up, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the tension. Captain Thal believes in absolute control. He sees emotions as chaos. To him, order is everything. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sounds exhausting." Rin tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mark said, pushing off the wall, "how does he live like that? No joy, no laughter, no fun. Just rules and order. It's like living in a cage." Rin looked down at her hands. "It's the Xylorian way. We were taught that emotions are dangerous, that they lead to mistakes." Mark crouched in front of her, his voice gentle. "And do you believe that?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not anymore." Mark smiled. "Good. Because laughter isn't just about fun. It's about strength. It's about connecting with people, even in the darkest times." Before Rin could respond, the door to the cell hissed open. 2 guards stepped inside, their expressions stern. "The captain has requested your presence," one of them said. "Both of you." Mark and Rin exchanged a glance before following the guards out of the cell. They were led to the command chamber, where Captain Thal stood with his arms crossed. Behind him, the other Xylorian officers watched silently, their faces unreadable. "Rin," the captain said, his voice cold, "you claim that human laughter and emotions have value, that they are not weaknesses." "Yes," Rin said firmly, her antennae straightening. "I believe they make us stronger." The captain's gaze shifted to Mark. "And you, human, you seem confident that your chaotic ways are superior to our order." Mark shrugged, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I wouldn't say superior, just more fun." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Then prove it." Mark blinked. "Prove what?" "That your laughter has value," the captain said. "You claim it brings strength and connection. Show me." Mark straightened, a grin spreading across his face. "Are you saying you want me to make you laugh?" The captain's expression hardened. "If you succeed, I will reconsider my stance. If you fail, you and Rin will face the consequences." Rin's antennae twitched nervously, but Mark seemed unfazed. He turned to her, his grin unwavering. "Looks like it's showtime." The guards cleared a space in the command chamber, and Mark stepped forward. He rubbed his hands together, scanning the room as if he were about to perform on a grand stage. "All right," he said, his voice loud and confident. "Let's start with something simple." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, brightly colored object, a rubber chicken. The Xylorian stared at it blankly as Mark held it up. "This," he said, holding it like a prized artifact, "is the pinnacle of human comedy." He gave the chicken a dramatic squeeze, and its loud, ridiculous squawk echoed through the chamber. Rin stifled a laugh, her hand covering her mouth. A few of the Xylorian officers exchanged confused glances, but the captain's face remained stony. "Okay, tough crowd," Mark said, tossing the chicken aside. "Let's try something else." He mimicked slipping on an imaginary banana peel, flailing his arms wildly before landing on the floor with an exaggerated thud. Rin giggled, unable to help herself, but the captain's expression didn't change. Mark got up, brushing himself off. "All right, time for the big guns." He pulled a small projector from his pocket, one he had brought with him in case of an emergency. "You're about to witness a masterpiece." He activated the projector, and a classic slapstick comedy scene began to play. The Xylorians watched in silence as the human actors stumbled, slipped, and engaged in exaggerated antics. Rin was laughing openly now, her musical giggles filling the chamber. A few of the younger Xylorian officers exchanged smiles, their stoic facades beginning to crack. But the captain remained impassive. As the video ended, Mark turned to the captain. "Nothing." "Really? Come on, that was gold." The captain's eyes narrowed. This is your proof. Trivial antics and absurd behavior. Mark's grin faded slightly. It's more than that. Laughter isn't just about jokes. It's about seeing the world differently. It's about finding joy in unexpected places. Rin stepped forward, her voice steady. Captain, I know this is difficult for you to understand. It was for me too. But laughter isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It's what makes us alive. The captain stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he let out a slow breath. Perhaps, he said, his voice softer than before. But if it is a strength, it must prove itself under scrutiny. Mark smirked. Then get ready, Captain, because I'm just getting started. The captain's revelation. The air in the command chamber was tense as Mark stood before Captain Thal, his eyes sparkling with determination. The other Xylorian officers watched in silence, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Rin stood to the side, her antennae twitching nervously. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. Mark wasn't giving up. All right, Captain, Mark said, pacing slowly. You want proof that laughter and emotions have value. Let's do this properly. He turned to Rin and gestured for her to join him. Rin, you've seen what humans do to make each other laugh. Now it's your turn. Let's show them together. Rin blinked in surprise. Me? I don't know how to make jokes. Sure, you do, Mark said with a grin. You just don't know it yet. Humor comes from being honest, from seeing the world in a way no one else does. Just be yourself. The Xylorian officers exchanged puzzled glances as Rin hesitated. Then, summoning her courage, she stepped forward. Okay, I'll try. Mark placed the rubber chicken in her hands and whispered something in her ear. Rin nodded, her silver eyes gleaming with determination. Turning to face the room, Rin held up the rubber chicken with both hands. This is a sacred object from the humans, she began, her voice steady. It is called a rubber chicken. It has the power to squawk when squeezed. She gave the chicken a dramatic squeeze, and its loud squawk echoed through the chamber. A few of the younger Xylorian officers chuckled, their stiff postures relaxing slightly. Rin, emboldened by their reaction, continued. But its true power lies in its ability to confuse and amuse, she said, her antennae twitching with amusement. Like humans themselves. This time, more of the officers laughed. Even the captain's lips twitched, though he quickly regained his composure. Mark clapped his hands. See, you're a natural. Rin smiled, her confidence growing. Maybe emotions aren't so bad after all. The captain raised a hand, and the room fell silent. He stepped forward, his sharp gaze fixed on Rin and Mark. You have proven that humans are skilled at creating chaos, but how does this translate to strength? Mark's smile faded, and he took a deep breath. Because laughter and emotions aren't just about having fun. They're about resilience. They help us endure the toughest times and connect with others. When humans face danger or loss, we don't just fight. We laugh. We remind ourselves that even in the darkest moments, there's something worth smiling about. Rin stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Captain, I've spent my whole life believing emotions were a weakness, but now I see they can be a source of strength. They give us hope. They make us brave. The captain stared at them, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to his officers. What do you think? Is there truth in their words? For a moment, the room was silent. Then one of the younger officers stepped forward. Captain, she said, her voice hesitant. I felt something when I watched the humans' video. It was strange, but not unpleasant. Another officer nodded. Perhaps emotions are not as dangerous as we were taught. The captain's gaze swept over his crew, his jaw tightening. Finally, he turned back to Mark and Rin. Very well, he said, his voice measured. If what you say is true, then you will have the chance to prove it. Tomorrow, you will present your case to the entire crew. Show them why emotions have value. Convince them that laughter is a strength. Mark grinned. You've got it, Captain. The captain's eyes narrowed. But know this, if you fail, there will be consequences. As the guards escorted Mark and Rin back to the holding cell, Rin couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. Do you really think we can convince them? She asked. Mark shrugged, his grin unwavering. I know we can. We just have to show them what makes humans special. Rin smiled, her antennae twitching with hope. For the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. Together, they were challenging centuries of tradition. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the Xylorian way of life forever. The stage was set for a showdown between two cultures, and the stakes had never been higher. Would laughter and emotions triumph over cold logic and order? Only time would tell. The ultimate laugh. The Xylorian ship's vast assembly hall was filled with its crew, their expressions as stoic and unreadable as always. Rows of officers and workers stood at attention, their posture rigid. Above them, Captain Thel sat in his elevated command seat, his sharp eyes fixed on the platform below. Standing on that platform, illuminated by the soft glow of the overhead lights, were Mark and Rin. Mark adjusted the makeshift microphone he'd been given, glancing around the room. He could feel the weight of hundreds of curious and skeptical eyes on him. Rin stood beside him, clutching a rubber chicken in one hand and a small box of bubble wrap in the other. Despite the high stakes, there was a glimmer of determination in her silver eyes. All right, everyone, Mark began, his voice calm and confident. I know you're all wondering why you're here. You've been told emotions are dangerous. That laughter is a weakness. But I'm here to show you that they're the opposite. Emotions are what make life worth living. They're what make us strong. The Xylorians remained silent, their expressions unchanging. Mark took a deep breath and smiled. And the best way to show you is through humor. Let's start with something simple. He gestured to Rin, who stepped forward, her antennae twitching nervously. She held up the rubber chicken. This is a sacred object, she said, echoing her joke from before. It is called a rubber chicken, and it has the power toe. She squeezed it, and a loud squawk filled the hall. A few Xylorians blinked in surprise, their antennae twitching. One of the younger officers stifled a chuckle, and Rin smiled. Encouraged, she held up the box of bubble wrap. And this, she said, is a human invention. It's called bubble wrap. Watch. She tore off a small piece and began popping the bubbles one by one. The soft popping sounds echoed in the silent hall, and soon a ripple of amusement spread through the crowd. More Xylorians began to smile, small, hesitant smiles, but smiles nonetheless. Mark grinned. See, it's not so hard. Laughter is contagious. It spreads, and it brings us together. The real challenge came when Mark unveiled his secret weapon, a short comedic film he had prepared with the help of Rin. Using the ship's main projector, he displayed the film on the large screen behind them. The Xylorians watched as the characters on screen engaged in slapstick antics, exaggerated expressions, and ridiculous mishaps. At first, the hall was silent. But as the scenes grew more absurd, soft chuckles began to fill the air. A Xylorian engineer in the front row let out a loud laugh when one of the characters slipped on a banana peel, and the sound seemed to break the tension in the room. More laughter followed, hesitant at first, but growing in volume and confidence. Even Captain Thal couldn't hide the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. His stern demeanor wavered as he watched his crew laugh, something he had never seen before. As the film ended, Mark stepped forward again. That feeling you have right now, that lightness in your chest, that warmth in your heart, that's what humans call joy. It's what makes us keep going, even when things are hard, and it's what connects us to each other. Rin stepped up beside him, her voice soft but steady. Captain, crew, I've lived my whole life believing emotions were a weakness, but now I see that they're what make us strong. They give us hope, courage, and the ability to face anything. I don't want to live without that anymore." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Captain Thal. He stood slowly, his expression unreadable. The weight of his gaze fell on Rin and Mark. And for a moment, the air was thick with anticipation. Finally, the captain spoke. "You have shown us something we did not understand," he said, his voice calm but thoughtful. "You have challenged centuries of tradition and belief, and while I do not fully agree with your methods, I cannot deny the truth in your words." He paused, looking out at his crew. Laughter may not be a weakness. It may indeed be a strength. A murmur spread through the hall, and Rin's antennae straightened with hope. Mark smiled, his confidence unshaken. The captain turned back to them. "From this day forward, the Xylorian people will begin to explore the value of emotions. But be warned, change does not come easily. You have started something, but it is up to us to decide where it leads." Mark bowed slightly, his grin widening. "That's all we ask, Captain." As the crew began to disperse, laughter still lingering in the air, Rin turned to Mark, her eyes shining. "We did it." Mark chuckled. "No, you did it. You showed them the courage to change." Rin smiled, her heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, she felt truly free. Free to laugh, to feel, to live. As they walked out of the hall together, Mark nudged her playfully. "So what's next for the Xylorian comedian?" Rin grinned, holding up the rubber chicken. "I think I'll need a lot more of these." Their laughter echoed through the ship, a sound that would soon become a part of Xylorian life, a sound that marked the beginning of a new chapter for both their people.